On a chilly night in January 2018, the peaceful town of Millfield, Ohio was rocked by a brutal crime. The victim, 25-year-old Samantha Lewis, was found dead in her apartment by her roommate. The scene was a horrific one, with Lewis having suffered multiple stab wounds to her chest and neck. The police arrived at the scene and quickly secured the area. They interviewed Lewis' roommate and several of her friends, but none of them had any information that could help them solve the crime. They also reviewed surveillance footage from the building, but it didn't provide any clues either. The investigation continued for weeks, but the case went cold. That was until a neighbor reported seeing a suspicious-looking man in the building on the night of the murder. The man was described as being in his mid-30s with short hair and a scruffy beard. He was seen leaving the building shortly after the murder occurred. The police followed up on this lead and began investigating people who fit the description. After weeks of searching, they finally found a man who matched the description. His name was Jonathan Smith, and he had a history of violent crimes. The police brought Smith in for questioning, but he denied any involvement in the murder. However, they were able to obtain a search warrant for his apartment and found evidence that linked him to the crime. They found a blood-stained shirt and a knife with traces of Samantha Lewis blood on it. Smith was arrested and charged with the murder of Samantha Lewis. At his trial, the prosecution presented a compelling case, detailing the forensic evidence and witness testimonies that linked Smith to the crime. Smith's defense team tried to argue that the evidence was circumstantial and that there was no direct proof that he had killed Lewis. However, the jury wasn't convinced and found Smith guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The town of Millfield was left to pick up the pieces after the tragic event, but the resolution of the case brought some sense of closure to Samantha Lewis' family and friends. The memory of that cold January night would linger for years to come, a reminder that even the quietest of towns can be home to brutal crimes. Despite the conviction of Jonathan Smith, the community of Millfield remained on edge. They were shaken by the brutal nature of Samantha Lewis' murder and were fearful that there might be more killers lurking in their small town. The police tried to reassure the public that Smith acted alone, but the fear had already taken hold. People were more cautious when walking alone at night, and the local stores started to see an uptick in the sale of self-defense products like pepper spray and tasers. As time passed, the town slowly started to heal from the tragedy. However, rumors began to circulate that Smith was not the only one involved in the murder. Some believed that he had been part of a larger group of killers, and that there were still people out there who were responsible for Samantha Lewis' death. The police investigated these rumors, but they were unable to find any evidence to support them. They insisted that Smith acted alone, and that there was no reason to believe that anyone else was involved in the crime. Despite this, the rumors continued to spread, and some people in the community started to become obsessed with the case. They created online forums and chat groups dedicated to discussing the murder of Samantha Lewis, and they pored over every detail of the case, trying to find any clues that might have been missed. Years went by, and the town slowly started to forget about the murder of Samantha Lewis. It remained a tragic event in their history, but it no longer dominated their thoughts and fears. Then, in 2021, a new development in the case shocked the community once again. Jonathan Smith had been found dead in his prison cell, an apparent suicide. This news reignited the rumors that there had been more people involved in the murder, and it sparked a renewed interest in the case. The police launched a new investigation into the murder of Samantha Lewis, hoping to put the rumors to rest once and for all. They conducted interviews with people who had been close to Smith, hoping to uncover any information that might help them solve the case. Despite their efforts, the investigation turned up nothing new. The evidence still pointed to Smith as the sole killer, and there was no reason to believe that anyone else was involved in the crime. The community of Millfield was left with more questions than answers. The murder of Samantha Lewis remained a haunting mystery, one that had shaken their small town to its core and left them with a deep sense of unease. They could only hope that one day, the truth about what happened that cold January night would finally be revealed. The investigation into the murder of Samantha Lewis continued for months, with the police following up on every lead and tip that they received. Despite their best efforts, however, they were unable to find any new evidence that would shed light on the case. The town of Millfield remained on edge, with people still fearful that there might be more killers out there. Some residents started to take matters into their own hands, setting up neighborhood watch groups and organizing self-defense classes. Meanwhile, the media coverage of the case continued to grow. Journalists from around the country descended on Millfield, eager to uncover any new details about the murder of Samantha Lewis. They interviewed friends and family members, local law enforcement officials, and anyone else who might have information about the case. As the months went by, the coverage of the case started to die down. The media moved on to other stories, and the town of Millfield slowly returned to its normal routine. Then, in the summer of 2022, a new piece of evidence was discovered that would turn the case on its head. A group of hikers stumbled upon a backpack in a remote part of the nearby woods. Inside the backpack, they found a knife with blood on it, along with a note that read, "I killed Samantha Lewis." The hikers immediately contacted the police, who rushed to the scene. They took the backpack and its contents into evidence and began investigating who might have left it there. It didn't take long for them to track down the person responsible. It turned out to be a man who had been living in Millfield at the time of the murder but had since moved away. He had a history of mental illness and had been in and out of treatment centers for years. The man confessed to the murder of Samantha Lewis, explaining that he had become obsessed with her and had followed her home on the night of the murder. He claimed that he had no memory of actually killing her, but that he must have done it in a fit of delusion. The confession shocked the town of Millfield, who had been living with the fear of a killer on the loose for years. The news that the real killer had been found brought a sense of closure to the community, who could finally start to put the tragedy behind them. The man responsible for Samantha Lewis' murder was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. He was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The town of Millfield slowly started to heal from the trauma of the murder, knowing that justice had finally been served. They could now remember Samantha Lewis for who she was, a beloved member of their community whose life was tragically cut short. After the man's confession and subsequent arrest, the town of Millfield breathed a collective sigh of relief. But as the investigation delved deeper, a shocking twist was uncovered. It turned out that the man was not acting alone in the murder of Samantha Lewis. He had been coerced and manipulated by a group of individuals who had convinced him to carry out the killing. The group had been involved in a dangerous cult that was obsessed with death and murder. They had been conducting dark rituals in secret, and Samantha Lewis had unknowingly stumbled upon one of their gatherings. The cult had feared that Samantha would expose their activities to the authorities and had decided to silence her. They had found the man, who was vulnerable due to his mental illness, and convinced him to carry out the killing on their behalf. The revelation shocked the town of Millfield and sent shockwaves throughout the country. The cult members were arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, along with several other charges related to their activities. The trial was long and arduous, with the cult members vehemently denying any involvement in Samantha Lewis' murder. But the evidence was overwhelming, and they were eventually found guilty on all charges. The town of Millfield was left reeling from the revelation that their community had been infiltrated by a dangerous cult. They struggled to come to terms with the fact that such evil could exist in their peaceful town. But in the aftermath of the trial, the community rallied together. They vowed to never forget Samantha Lewis and the tragedy that had occurred, but they also resolved to move forward and build a safer, more united community. The town held a memorial service for Samantha, which was attended by hundreds of people who wanted to pay their respects and honor her memory. And as the service came to a close, a feeling of hope and resilience filled the air. The town of Millfield had been through a dark time, but they had emerged stronger and more united than ever before. Despite the harrowing experience the town of Millfield had gone through, the sense of unity and hope persisted. The community banded together, holding regular meetings to discuss how they could make their town safer and more resilient against outside threats. In the wake of the cult's exposure, the town's law enforcement agencies implemented new training and protocols to better deal with any potential cult or criminal activity. The town also organized a community outreach program, inviting mental health experts to speak about the importance of addressing mental illness. Moreover, the tragedy of Samantha Lewis inspired a wave of activism in the community. Residents started volunteering and advocating for mental health and awareness. Local charities and support groups were formed to help victims of crime, particularly those dealing with the aftermath of traumatic events. The town became a beacon of resilience and a testament to the human spirit. It was no longer just a place on a map, but a community that had come together in the face of adversity. Over the years, the tragedy of Samantha Lewis continued to haunt the town of Millfield, but it also served as a reminder of the importance of staying vigilant and united against any threats to their safety and well-being. Samantha's memory lived on through the acts of kindness and the positive changes that had been brought about in the wake of her murder. Her family found solace in knowing that their daughter's death had not been in vain and that she had inspired a movement for change in their town. And so, the town of Millfield continued to move forward, not forgetting the past, but using it as a foundation for a brighter, safer future. Years went by, and the town of Millfield remained a peaceful and tight-knit community. It had grown in population and prosperity, but its core values and resilience remained unchanged. As the years passed, new generations of Millfield residents emerged, who had no direct connection to the tragedy of Samantha Lewis, but who had grown up hearing the stories and the lessons learned from that dark chapter in their town's history. Despite the town's ongoing prosperity, some people still couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. They wondered if there were any other dangerous groups or individuals hiding in the shadows, waiting to strike at any moment. One such individual was a man named Peter, who had just moved into town. He was a loner, rarely seen in public, and had a mysterious past. Despite this, no one suspected him of anything sinister, as they believed that their town had moved past the tragedy of Samantha Lewis. However, things began to change when a group of teenagers stumbled upon something in the woods that sent shockwaves through the community. They found what appeared to be a shrine, surrounded by symbols and strange markings. The authorities were called, and an investigation was launched. As the investigation deepened, it became clear that the shrine was the work of a new cult that had formed in Millfield. The cult was made up of individuals who shared Peter's dark obsession with death and murder. As the authorities closed in, the cult went into hiding, but Peter remained elusive. He seemed to be one step ahead of the authorities, and no one knew where he was or what he was planning. As fear and paranoia spread throughout the town once again, the authorities turned to an unlikely source for help. They reached out to the family of Samantha Lewis, who had become something of a symbol of hope and resilience in the town. Samantha's family, despite the pain that the past had caused them, agreed to help. They worked tirelessly with law enforcement agencies, providing any information they could to help bring the cult to justice. In the end, Peter was caught, and the cult was disbanded. But the town of Millfield knew that they could never let their guard down again. They had learned that evil could come in many forms and that they needed to remain vigilant and united against any threats to their safety and well-being. As the town moved forward once again, they did so with the knowledge that their strength and resilience came not from forgetting the past, but from using it to build a brighter future. As the town of Millfield breathed a sigh of relief, believing that the threat of the cult and Peter had been neutralized, a shadowy figure watched from the distance. The figure had been lurking in the shadows, biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike. No one in Millfield knew who this person was or what their intentions were, but the sense of unease that had plagued the town in the aftermath of Samantha Lewis's murder began to creep back in. The people of Millfield knew that they couldn't let their guard down again, that they had to remain vigilant and united against any potential threats to their town's safety and well-being. The question remained, who was this shadowy figure, and what did they want from the town of Millfield? The answer would remain a mystery, for now, leaving the town on edge and uncertain of what the future held.